Story by Becca Whitaker. The Roadside Imitation. Trying to write this out was surprisingly difficult. When I think about the experience without focusing too hard or trying to put it into words, I can remember more of it. But once I start concentrating on specific details and trying to describe them, the memory gets fuzzier. Because of that, I had to write this in short spurts and keep coming back to it. The longer I focused on it at one time, the harder it became to hold on to the details. I have posted this experience in a few other communities, but I added a little more to this version because more relevant information came back to me later when I was thinking about it more abstractly, instead of actively trying to describe it. This happened years ago, and to this day, it is one of the strangest experiences my family has ever had. My husband and I were driving our 4-year-old daughter to her grandmother's house in Massachusetts so she could take her out to dinner. We were on one of those quieter back roads that branches off from the main part of town. It was not extremely rural, but it was not a busy road either. It was still fully daylight when this happened, so darkness or poor visibility was not a factor. As we were driving, all three of us saw something standing partly in the roadway, closer to the edge than the center. It was not blocking traffic, but it was definitely standing in the road rather than safely off to the side. We have never been able to explain what we saw. The weirdest part is not just what it looked like, it is how difficult it is to remember. When I think about it as a whole, I can still picture it fairly clearly in my mind. But the moment I try to focus on specific details or describe it to someone else, the image almost seems to fall apart. The details become blurry, and it is incredibly frustrating because I know I saw it. It is a very strange feeling that I have never experienced with any other memory. My husband has described something similar when he has tried to remember it. From what all three of us remember, it was roughly the height of a tall adult, probably around 6 feet. It was completely black and had no distinguishable facial features. It had long, black, unkempt hair that looked matted or locked together in thick strands. I do not know if they were dreadlocks, severely tangled hair, or something else entirely, but the hair is one of the clearest physical features I can remember. Its clothing also did not look right. It seemed to be wearing multiple dark layers, possibly including something like a long black trench coat, but the layers did not make sense. It is hard to explain. They did not hang naturally or look like normal clothing layered on top of itself. I remember looking at it and immediately thinking that something about what it was wearing was wrong, even though I still cannot explain exactly why. The best way I can describe the overall impression it gave me is that it felt like whatever it was trying to act like a person. I am not saying that is what it actually was. That was simply the feeling I had while looking at it. It seemed almost human, but something about it felt fundamentally wrong. Then there was the umbrella. It was holding what looked like an old broken umbrella upside down with the canopy open. It was not simply carrying it or dragging it. It was pushing it back and forth along the pavement, as if it were trying to use it like a vacuum cleaner. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but that is honestly the closest comparison I can make. It looked like someone repeatedly moving a vacuum across the floor, except it was using an open, broken umbrella upside down in the road. As we drove past it, its entire body slowly rotated toward our car, not just its head, its whole body. The movement was slow, deliberate, and unlike anything I have ever seen another person do. I do not remember seeing eyes or even a face, but I knew it was looking directly at us. The instant it turned toward us, both my husband and I experienced something I still cannot adequately explain. I have been scared before. I was startled. I have been in dangerous situations. This was not any of those feelings. It was the most unnatural sense of dread and immediate peril I have ever experienced in my entire life. It felt primal, as though every instinct in my body was screaming that something was profoundly wrong. It was not a thought I had. It was an overwhelming feeling that hit both of us at the exact same moment. The strange thing is that it never chased us, never moved toward us, and never did anything outwardly threatening. Yet that feeling remains one of the strongest memories I have from that day. What finally broke the silence was our 4-year-old daughter from the back seat. In a calm, matter-of-fact voice, she simply said, "That wasn't real." Neither of us had said a word to her. That sentence snapped us out of whatever we were feeling, but it is also what has made this experience stick with us all these years. We have talked about it many times since then. The details remain frustratingly difficult to describe, but the core memories never change. The fact that it happened in broad daylight, the roughly 6-foot figure, the long matted hair, the clothing that somehow looked wrong, the feeling that it was trying to act like a person, the broken upside-down umbrella being pushed back and forth like a vacuum cleaner, the slow full body turn toward our car, the overwhelming feeling of dread. So we always like to imagine that monsters, demons, things that go bump in the night, well, that they reside in the night, but maybe not. Maybe they do indeed walk in the daylight, but as imposters. They're not camouflaged in the conventional sense. They just stay out of sight most of the time. But when they don't, well, you can definitely see them more clearly, and you're not supposed to. I don't know if these are aliens or really beasts and demons and monsters of the world, which I don't buy into as much, like skinwalkers and those kinds of myths. I don't view them as concretely as I do, say, an alien, which I genuinely believe is a scientific possibility, even an inevitability, if you will, given the scale of the universe. Well, that they visited us is maybe less inevitable, but still, I'm highly confident that they're here. And in fact, not just one species. My guess is there's multiple. Anyways, I do believe that these kinds of anomalies, people that don't seem right, or monsters, they could be some sort of drone or automaton that is meant to scout but malfunctioned, something like that. And it goes back to the line in your story where you feel like they were trying to act like a person. Imitation is difficult. We have so many subtle social nuances and tics. Even individually, but culturally, as a species, to try to imitate that is very difficult. If we went to a different planet, and even if we had lots of time to study the inhabitants, it would be difficult to go and insert ourselves and then pass as one of them. Not impossible, but difficult. Hi and welcome. I'm Paul. This little platypus in the Matrix is Dave. Today I have 11 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite one at the end, as always. Let's get to it. Story by Tomato Teeth, A Crystal Memory. Yesterday when I woke up, there was a glass on my counter with a big crack in it and a chip on the rim. It's my son's favorite glass, and it already had a weird enough story. In 2015, when my boy was 9, the glass fell and was damaged. My son cried when he saw it. He's neurodivergent, so it was a pretty big thing to him. It was his special glass, so it was memorable. I tried comforting him by telling him we have a second identical glass, so it's terrible, yes, but it'll be okay. I set the damaged glass aside to safely wrap before putting it in the trash, and then promptly forgot all about it until he brought it to me a few days later. "Mom, the glass healed. My glass is all better." I feel like he must have grabbed the identical one and thought it was his, so I was like, yay, until later, when I saw the identical undamaged twin still safely in the cabinet, and the now undamaged, healed glass in my hand. I felt like maybe I was mistaken. I was actually creeped out, so I shoved it out of my mind, but I know what I saw. Yesterday, it's on the counter, with the same crack and chip as it had in 2015 before it healed. I texted my now 20-year-old son, who was out, and asked if he dropped his glass, and he said no. Why? So I tell him about the crack, and there's a pause, and he asks for a picture, which I send. He says, "That's the same crack, the glass unhealed. What the hell?" And when he got home, we talked about it, and he remembered perfectly, and recounted the whole thing exactly as it happened back then. He does remember it being cracked and crying, and then both glasses being fine. He told me, We have to keep it. We can't throw it out. If it happens again, then we have pictures, we'll know. There have been other weird things, but this glass experience is the one that made me look for others too. Story by Magic Spa, The Solution Outside. It was August 2006, and I was deep in the middle of finishing a major report for my master's. Stakes were high. Every day late was a 5% deduction off the final grade. Nobody could afford that. On top of it, my old desktop was falling apart. One specific problem was the mouse port kept cutting out. The cursor would just freeze and I'd have to stop everything. I figured a USB to PS2 adapter from a local PC shop would fix it. Just plug into a different port. The problem was time, walking to the shop, and if they didn't have one, trekking into the city center was going to eat hours I didn't have. So I laced up, went out my front door, headed for the street. Didn't even make it past my own doorstep. Right there on the pavement outside my building was a USB to PS2 adapter. I just stood there staring at it. Picked it up expecting it to be cracked or busted or thrown out for a reason. Turned it over in my hand, and it looked completely fine. No bent pins, no cracked plastic, nothing. I turned around, went back up to my room, plugged the mouse in, popped it into the PC, turned it on. It worked perfectly. Didn't lose an hour walking anywhere, just sat back down and kept working on the report. It's been 20 years and I've never once seen a USB to PS2 adapter just sitting on a sidewalk since. Out of all the junk that could fall out of someone's bag, a cable, a flash drive, headphones, for a perfectly working adapter to land 2 yards from my door at the exact hour I needed it, is a lot to swallow. I have no idea what the odds are on that. Feels like it's gotta be millions to one. Okay, this reminds me of another story. It's been quite a while, but this was just a man that was in his apartment, and he needed money or some sort of item, I forgot what it was. He went out to the elevator, and it was just there in the elevator, if I recall. Or maybe he went outside first, came back, and then it was there. Yeah, something like that. And it just seems like, even though the details are fuzzy, the theme remains consistent, that when an object or item is needed, truly needed, beyond the immediacy of what we can think, then it seems like we can manifest it, or it's placed there for us by some other entity. Very kind of them. Story by Tronman100, an 8-bit miracle. This is a small thing in the grand scheme, but it's one of those hyper-specific childhood memories that just never left my head. I was a kid sitting on the floor in front of the TV playing the original Super Mario Bros. On the NES. Cross-legged on the carpet, locked into the 8-bit music timing every jump. I was mid-run and had to use the bathroom, so I decided to pause it. Here's the thing though, I had literally just thought about pausing. My thumb hadn't even started moving towards start yet, hands were still on the D-pad and A and B, still keeping Mario alive, and the second that thought crossed my mind, the game paused. That little Nintendo pause chime went off, everything froze on screen, Mario stuck mid-jump. I just sat there staring at the TV, then at the controller, then back at the TV. I know I didn't press start. No accidental bump, no thumb slip, no input from me at all. It was like the console read my mind and paused the second I decided I wanted it to. Obviously, after I got back from the bathroom, I spent a while trying to figure out what happened. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to will it to pause again, just by thinking about it. Picturing the pause menu in my head, focusing as hard as a kid can, hoping I'd found some weird superpower or glitch. Didn't work. Not once. The NES went right back to being a normal 80s console that wanted me to actually press the button. Looking back, there's probably a boring explanation, dust in the controller making brief contact, some static or electrical hiccup that happened to trip start at the exact same millisecond I had the thought. But the timing was so exact it still feels weird to me. Still think about it sometimes when I've got a controller in my hand. Story by Hot Iced Tea. One Sentence at Dawn. About 8 years ago, I was still living with my parents, and a mystery started brewing in our house. Out of nowhere, this foul smell started coming up from the garage downstairs. Rotten eggs, but bad. Really bad. We figured it'd pass on its own, but it just kept getting worse. By about a week in, it was unbearable. My mom actually started getting sick from it. Headaches, nausea, and she finally said she wasn't sleeping in that house again until we figured out what it was. So, we tore the garage apart, scrubbed and flushed the floor drains in case something was backed up. Went through every shelf and cupboard looking for spilled chemicals or old paint cans, anything. Found nothing naturally. The place looked completely normal, but the smell wasn't going anywhere. I went to bed that night, still stuck on it, extremely frustrated. Then I had a dream. My grandfather, who'd been dead for years at that point, was just there, and he said one thing to me: take the charger off the battery. That's it. No explanation, nothing else. I woke up and it was still sitting in my head, and I couldn't figure out why, because as far as I knew, we didn't have anything charging down there. But the dream felt too specific to shake off, so I got up and went down to the garage, half asleep, to check. There it was in the corner. My dad had hooked up an old motorcycle battery to a trickle charger and just forgot about it. The battery had gone bad and was overcharging, basically boiling, pumping out hydrogen sulfide, which is exactly what rotten eggs smell like and exactly what had been making my mom sick. I unplugged it, threw the garage doors open to air it out. I still don't know if I'd noticed something without realizing it, and my brain worked it out in the dream, or if my grandfather actually tipped me off. I'm just glad I got up and checked. So the question in this story is, was this actually his grandfather from the beyond, playing on rules we can't understand and interacting with loved ones after you're dead? Or was it the guardian angel of this person that was imitating or passing off as his grandfather to increase credibility? Could be either or to me, but either way, I think it's beautiful and just touches my soul. I love the idea of interacting in any way with loved ones beyond the mortal coil. Even with quantum immortality, which is always the kind of wrench in the machine, if you will, or maybe not, it doesn't completely break the machine, but it does make you wonder how it fits together. If your soul was transferred to a different universe, maybe it only applies when there are no other copies to transfer to, so you're truly dead. Maybe that's why they're so infrequent. That's an idea. But then you wonder about ghosts of young people. So it's not that they died of old age in every single copy of every single universe, which is, there's a lot of them. So if it's a young person, that would be very unlucky that every single copy everywhere has perished. Damn. It would explain the infrequency of occurrences. Story by Lazy Party 3469. Nothing under my feet. I went to the dog park one afternoon with my dog, holding one of those bright fluorescent yellow frisbees, the kind you can't lose in grass even if you try. Wide open field, we were the only ones there, no other dogs to grab it and run off. I threw it straight down the middle of the field, and my dog took off after it, tracking it the whole way. I watched it land clean on the open grass. My dog saw it land too. He ran right up to the spot, and then just stopped, completely confused. I walked over expecting to see it sitting right there. It wasn't there. We searched that whole field. Nowhere for a bright yellow disc to hide on flat open ground. Both of us watched it hit the dirt, and then it was just gone. If that was the only time something like this happened, I'd write it off as bad lighting, or my eyes playing tricks on me. But basically the same thing happened before with my car keys. Standing on flat open ground, fumbled my keys, watched them drop straight down right at my feet, heard them hit the ground, bent down to grab them, and there was nothing there. Got on my knees, checked the grass, checked around my shoes, checked a 10-foot radius. Gone the second they hit the ground. Never found them. I know how this sounds, I'm not crazy. Both times someone else was standing right there with me. They saw the frisbee land, they saw the keys drop, and they were just as confused as I was when neither one turned up. Some things just disappear on you, and you're left standing in an empty field, wondering what took your stuff. Story by Meta Ditter, Found Among Millions. Back in the early 2000s, I was living in Tokyo. Rush hour is something like 13 million people all moving through the city at once, a wall of commuters through the stations and platforms and underground corridors. This one afternoon, I was on the Chiyoda line, everyone shoulder to shoulder but somehow orderly about it. I was standing in the aisle, holding an overhead bar with one hand, and trying to read a copy of the Japan Times with the other, just killing time on the commute. At some point I glanced up from the paper at the row of seated passengers in front of me, and there was another Westerner sitting there, sweatpants and a baseball cap, sticking out pretty hard against all the dark suits around him. Running into another foreigner on that train wasn't unheard of, but it was rare enough that we started talking. He was easygoing, and we ended up chatting for a few minutes about some softball league he played in around the city. Nothing more than a random pleasant conversation between two expats. The train pulled into a station, doors opened, the crowd shifted, and we went our separate ways. The next day, I had a job interview across town. Suit on, out the door with time to spare. I get to the office, check in, get walked into the interview room, and I look across the table and just freeze. Same guy from the train. No sweats this time, dressed for business, but there was no mistaking him. He recognized me at the same second I recognized him. Whatever awkwardness usually comes with a job interview was gone instantly. We just laughed about it. The interview went great. He hired me on the spot. Even now, decades later, I still think about how Tokyo isn't just big, it's enormous. Millions of overlapping trips a day across hundreds of miles of track. The odds of two people ending up in the same car or the same train on the same line at the same minute, talking, and then walking into the same interview room the next day. That's not a small coincidence. Something like 13 million to 1. But somehow it happened, and a random conversation on a crowded train ended up being the thing that got me the job. So this makes me think of, to what extent is our reality manufactured, controlled? It's like in the Hunger Games movies, where the game masters are managing the tiny details of the environment under the dome of the arena. They can create water, fire, gas, they can summon monsters, they can change even the scenery itself. Does any of that apply to us? Are we being managed like mice in a lab? Or maybe it's more parental. Maybe the entities that are managing us, or our environment at least, influencing us indirectly. Maybe they care about us? I mean, that would be preferable, but to me, I would hope that it's neither. I don't like the idea of anything managing our environment. Although if we were in a simulation, I guess it could be. But even then, it could just be a sandbox MMO, right? The developers create it, but they don't mess with anything in it when people are actually playing. Yeah. Maybe just mess a little bit. Just a little bit, and prankster type stuff, but nothing meant to induce a pathway or compel a pathway for a person. I don't like that idea. Story by Garbage Goat. Where did the time go? It was a completely ordinary morning, heading to work. My commute's an easy 15-20 minute walk max. I've always liked getting to work early, sitting down with coffee for a bit before things get busy, so I always leave with time to spare. That morning I walked out my door about an hour before my shift started. The walk itself felt totally normal. Stepped outside, took my usual route, walked at my normal pace. Didn't stop and talk to anyone, didn't take a detour, nothing weird happened along the way. As far as I could tell, it was just a regular 15-minute walk from my apartment to work. Then I pushed the door open, and the whole vibe inside was wrong. Instead of the usual quiet morning, it was chaos. Coworkers running around stressed, looking relieved the second they saw me. Before I could even say good morning, they're swarming me asking where I've been, why I wasn't answering my phone. I had no idea what they were talking about. Then I looked at the clock. I wasn't early. I wasn't even on time. I was 45 minutes late. A walk that felt like 15 minutes had somehow eaten an hour and 45 minutes. My first thought was, a clock was wrong somewhere, but I checked, and every clock agreed, including my phone. Not daylight savings, no time zone weirdness, no software update messing with anything. Clocks were right when I left the apartment. Clocks were right when I walked in the door. I still have no idea where that time went. Almost an hour and a half has passed between my apartment and work. I wasn't tired, wasn't disoriented on the walk, no gaps I could feel in the actual walking. Never happened before that day, never happened since. Story by Saddam Hussein. Alone at the Chalkboard. My mother told me this story recently, and it still gives me chills. She was in 5th grade. This was way before cell phones or tablets or any of that, so kids didn't have anything to keep them busy at the end of the day. It was right around 3 o'clock. The last bell was about to ring. Right before the bell, everyone packing up backpacks, zipping jackets, getting loud, getting ready to head out to the buses. She was standing near the front of the room, next to the big chalkboard. Everyone else was rushing around trying to leave, but she was just kind of messing with the chalkboard, picking up pieces of chalk, wiping stray marks off. Then she said she looked down at the chalk for a second, and when she looked back up, the room was dead quiet. She looked around expecting to see everyone heading out, her teacher at the desk, the usual mess of kids in the doorway, but nobody was there. Teacher gone. Classmates gone. No noise from the hallway either. Nothing. She looked at the clock. It wasn't 3 o'clock anymore. It said 4:40. An hour and 40 minutes gone. To her, it felt like she'd looked away for maybe a second, but somehow almost 2 hours had passed. She walked out into the hallway, and the whole school was empty, except for the janitor doing his rounds, and one teacher from a different grade still in their room working late. She had no idea where anyone went, or how she ended up standing there alone, or what happened during that missing hour and 40 minutes. Blacking out would make sense as an explanation, except when you actually think about the logistics, it gets weirder. In what world does a teacher lock up a classroom and send kids out to buses without noticing a 10-year-old still standing right there next to the chalkboard? How do her classmates walk past her and not say anything? How does the bus driver not notice a kid missing? Was she just standing there frozen the whole time while everyone moved around her, or was something else going on? That happened over 45 years ago now, and she still thinks about it. She has no idea where that time went, or what actually happened in that classroom while she was standing there messing with the chalk. Okay, so this is the kind of story that scares me more than monsters or aliens or skinwalkers or anything like that, because it's like the universe is quicksand under your feet. It evokes a sense of discombobulation, confusion, uncertainty, and terror. At least like inner terror, not so visceral, but it's always there, and you can't escape it because reality itself is apparently unstable. Time can reset or be warped, or like the black dot glitch, those terrify me too, because it's literally just a region of the simulation, I believe, that is just malfunctioning. Now, they do repair itself, apparently, so that's good. So it's not game over yet, but I don't like the idea that there could be errors in the simulation. That is very disconcerting. Story by Just Need Answers 78. The Nightstand Mystery. I lost my wallet once, and the whole thing still doesn't make sense to me. Started out normal enough, reached for it, wasn't there, retraced everywhere I'd been over the last 24 hours, called every restaurant and store I'd been to, asking if anyone turned in a wallet. Nobody had it. So, I tore the house apart. Couch cushions, drawers, every coat and pants pocket I own, under furniture, all of it. Nothing. Eventually, I just accepted it was gone, called the banks, froze the cards, and got ready to deal with replacing my ID. A couple months went by. Got new cards, moved on, stopped thinking about it. Then, one totally normal day, I walked into my bedroom, a room I'd slept in and cleaned every single day for 2 months straight. And there it is, wallet sitting right out in the open on my nightstand. I just froze for a second, walked over, picked it up like it might not actually be real. Opened it up and everything was still in there, IDs, old receipts, all of it untouched, exactly like the day it disappeared. There's no way it was sitting there the whole time. That nightstand is right next to my bed. I put my phone on it every night. I wipe it down. I reach over it for my alarm every morning. It wasn't tucked behind anything or shoved in a corner. Dead center on the nightstand, like someone had just set it down. I've got no explanation. Nobody broke in to return an old wallet. Nobody else found it and snuck it into my room. As far as I'm concerned, it just checked out of reality for a couple months and checked back in whenever it felt like it. Story by user 9876543210987. A promise rewritten. When I was in high school, I dated a guy, let's call him Bobby, and he gave me a bracelet engraved with his name, kind of a token of promise or whatever. I wore it for a while, but as things do, it ended up in the back of a drawer, and I basically forgot about it. Bobby and I broke up a year or two later and went our separate ways. Over the years, I'd see it in that drawer, here and there, while looking for something else, catch his name on it and toss it back in. Never had a reason to return it, since we'd long since lost touch, so it just sat there. Fast forward almost 30 years. My brother, we'll call him Brody, died suddenly, completely out of nowhere. To make it worse, that same week I was in the middle of moving in with my now husband. So, in the middle of all the grief and funeral stuff, I was also packing boxes, including that same drawer, which got moved to the new house. While unpacking, I dropped the drawer and everything spilled across the floor. I knelt down to pick it all up, and when I got to the bracelet, I picked it up to toss it back in, same as I'd done 100 times over 30 years, except the name on it wasn't Bobby. It said Brody, my brother's name. I just sat there on the floor holding it. There's no explanation for this. I never owned a bracelet with my brother's name on it. Brody never gave me one. My parents never gave me one with his name on it. I remember Bobby handing me that exact bracelet in high school, and I remember reading his name on it every single time I came across it in that drawer for 30 years. And now here I was, right after Brody died, looking down at his name stamped into the same piece of metal. I know the logical answer. Memory is not reliable, especially under grief, and the most likely explanation is that I've just been misremembering this whole time, and it always said Brody. Except that is not my recollection, not even close. I don't believe in ghosts or signs or anything like that. I'm a pretty logical person, but I can't shake this one. Every few years, I still pull that drawer open and check the engraving, half expecting it to say Bobby again. So far it hasn't. Still says Brody, still no explanation. My favorite one has to be the message from beyond, maybe a guardian angel, I'm not sure exactly, could have been your grandfather too, but just something so specific. It doesn't seem likely it was just your subconscious picking up on something you never even saw. No, that seems very unlikely to me. I do believe it's a gift from the beyond, you could say, and it's beautiful. Now time for the jokes of the day. My 19-year-old daughter just made this up, and I'm so proud. How can you tell if you're having a dinner with a termite? They order the house salad. Hopefully they have a lot of strong joists. Yesterday, I accidentally sent a naked picture of myself to everyone in my address book. Not only was it embarrassing, but it cost a fortune in stamps. Reminds me of the Elaine incident with the nipple slip. In the Christmas postcard, I believe it was. Apparently the W fell off the door for the women's restroom. It's not a good sign. When I asked my friend who works in IT, how do you make a motherboard? He explained, I usually tell her about my job. What happens when you cross a 4-leaf clover with poison ivy? You have a rash of good luck. If only. Alright, more glitches up here somewhere. Check them out, and I'll see you next time.